So now I'd like to call up the famous saxophone player, Ranjeet Panicker. Oh, there's a little joke on that. You may want to articulate a little bit.
Clicker.
Clicker? Ah. Go ahead.
The flag now or later?
Flag later.
You only get the flag if you're a winner. That's what he said. What?
You know the flag drill.
I do. Good morning. Good to see you. Good. Thank you for coming back to this session. See a lot of familiar faces. I see some new faces too. And then you see a blank screen. So in the 60s, or even before that, when you looked at a sport like high jump, people ran straight, and then they tried to jump over the bar. And it used to be a method that was known as a straddle or a scissor method, right? People just walked up, ran as fast as they could, they launched themselves, and they went over. And this continued for a long time. For the most part, people jumped maybe 7 feet and a few inches high. That was the record. And then it happened in 1968. There was something that got completely changed in the sport, which I think has been probably the most dramatic change in any sport. There was a term that came along called the Fosbury flop. And it was labeled to this individual, Dick Fosbury. You see the difference in how he's jumping over. So he ran, and then he twisted, and then he jumped backwards. And then he landed on his back. Folks before landed either on their feet or on their hands, and then they got up. Think about somebody trying to do this, right? Completely disregarding everything that was happening all these years and saying, I'm going to go do something completely different. It wasn't that he was really short. He was about 6 foot tall, 6'1", pretty comparable in size in terms to a lot of high jumpers that time. Why did he really do this? What drove him to do it? This is the talk of innovation, right? He saw an opportunity. He said, how do I stand out from the rest of the pack? How do I make a difference? And in 1968, he won the gold medal. His story is interesting, but I think what's more interesting is, for this community, what are your priorities, right? So we talk about innovation, we talk about all of our product suite, we talked about the learning, we talked about us coming together as a community. But when I talk about the priorities for enterprise architects, I sort of distill them into 4 areas. And I think one of the jobs that all of us as enterprise architects have is to architect the future. But the future is not what it used to be. And it's really hard to make predictions, especially about the future. Anybody get that quote? Maybe not. But it's really hard, right? Especially when things are changing so fast. You've got systems that you've had for a long time. You're trying to figure out how to make this agile, and then you keep hearing terms like clean core, which means that you need to do extensions, process customization in a cloud-compliant way. And there's always constant talk about innovation. You already heard this morning about how many new things we've launched, and I think now you're sitting here and thinking, how do I make sure that my business can consume it? All of this lands finally to that one question: the investments that you make with SAP and other vendors, does that provide value? So our jobs is really to go across these 4 topics. And if you can do that, you're a really successful enterprise architect. So let's talk about the business suite. Who's heard the term business suite before? Okay? Everybody's heard this business suite. To be precise, we used to call it Business Suite 7. Yes? So why are we talking about Business Suite again? Till last year, I used to stand here and talk about RISE. Now I talk about the Business Suite. So just for context, when we talked about Business Suite way back when, it was a collection of 3 or 4 on-premise integrated solutions. It was mostly ECC, CRM, SCM, and SRM, right? There was a little bit of PLM somewhere in there. It was an on-premise integrated solution. There is still a roadmap on how you get from there to this. My goal today is that when you walk away, you can explain it to somebody, what is the difference between that business suite and this business suite? I think as we go through the slides, there's going to be a lot of content, and I think the idea is to just situate you with the themes around the business suite. I think as you go through the detailed sessions in the next couple of days, I think you'll get a deeper understanding of why we are calling this a business suite. What are the dimensions of this business suite? How do you really make this journey for you in your own company happen? I've been here at SAP, this is my 18th year. I've had many jobs. Most recently, I ran consulting for North America. Now I head our enterprise architecture and transformation teams. And the goal is to help, to Anya's point and to Jason's earlier, is to help guide our customers on how do you get to the business suite. So in the next 20-ish minutes, I'm going to talk about what is the business suite, what are the dimensions of the business suite. And I think this is just the first opening of how you start thinking about the business suite. We're not going to get into details of, A, how you buy it, or commercially how you procure it. We're also not going to get into a lot of details of the implementation of business suite, right? But I think it's important as you start thinking about the business suite, you also think about your own journey to get to the business suite. All right. This is our purpose. I don't think this has changed, and I don't need to necessarily repeat it, right? What we are also trying to do is to drive transformation at scale. And those transformations should get you value. In all of these, we want to make sure that sustainability is in the core, embedded into our process. What you're also seeing that the rapid change in the business, right? The last times I've talked about how quickly things have changed in the last 5 years, not only in the enterprise application space, but all across us. When you look at each of these personas, they all have different demands, right? It's also important to understand now that all of these leaders in your business need to talk to each other, need to share data across each other, because that's the only way you'll get to those transformational outcomes. So the finance data needs to be available to the CEO, to the CIO, the CPO, so on and so forth. And the same things need to happen for the CFOs. So it's complex. This was one of the reasons we said we need to talk about this in a little bit more detail, right? So here you can now dig a little deeper into what are the specific priorities for each of these leaders. I just added another layer of complexity in terms of what the leaders are looking for. So when you are facing all these challenges, it was important that we frame this in the right context, and that's where you start talking about the idea of the new enterprise management framework. This starts the foundation of how we talk about the business suite. I'll talk about a couple of topics about how we package this together as a business suite. It's fairly simple if you think about it. The new idea of the business suite is a combination of applications, data, and AI. So if somebody said, what is the SAP business suite? It's a combination of these solution areas. How we package this together, how we deploy it, how you consume it, that's where this gets really interesting and tricky, right? But at a high level, it's important that you understand this. The most important changes are not necessarily in the transactional systems. You know these systems very well, right? Many of you probably run it. Many of you run S4, SuccessFactors, Ariba, so on and so forth, right? The transactional systems are not new. The data systems are also not necessarily new. How many of you still run BW? And you're still wondering what to do with BW, right? Jason talked about it. And then there's this constant talk about AI and how it changes. So when you pull these things together, and then you say, how does this drive transformation? That is the idea behind the business suite. You'll hear me talk a little bit more about AI and how Joule is the new UI, or we'd like for it to be. We'll also talk about these system of AI agents that can work together and make decisions that can drive transformation. The transactional systems create data. All these different systems so far used to have data definitions that were not consistent. Now we've got a unified data model. And that data model, which is semantically rich, now makes it easier for AIs to consume that data, right? So how does this actually look when we go into a more detail? I think you've seen this slide before, at least 3 times today. This is probably the 3rd time. It talks about the applications that I just talked about. We talked about the business data cloud, and we talked about the business AI pieces. The applications create that robust data. It was important that we have that unified view on the data, and that's how you look at this from a business data cloud. I'll talk a little bit more about what does that decompose into, and then you hear about topics like knowledge graph. Knowledge graph is a process that connects the dots between process and data, so AI can consume it easier and make those decisions with better reasoning and grounded data, right? So that's how the agents work. So when anybody is talking about a business suite, you'll have to talk about these 3 components of the business suite. It's not so much anymore about there's 4 applications, and that's what makes the business suite, right? So we'll have to talk about this in the context of applications, business data, and AI. The suite applications, these are not new, right? So last year I was here, for those of you who were here, we talked about the end-to-end process view. Tingania also showed you how to get into the process view from an enterprise architecture standpoint. When we look at the end-to-end business process view, we have an end-to-end business process view that assumes that everything runs on SAP. Clearly, you don't run everything on SAP. But then how do you map your business process to make sure that you know what's running in SAP, what's not running in SAP? And that's where the enterprise architecture framework is very, very relevant, right? How many of you have looked at that reference business architecture framework or the reference solution architecture framework? Few of you, right? We were having a conversation with one of our largest automotive customers. Between the SI, SAP, and the customer, we were all talking about different things in different terms about a process and what we wanted to get out of the transformation. Till somebody said, wait a minute, we need a consistent framework on how we can map process to solution architecture to finally then say these capabilities will drive value, and then it ties together with the solution architecture, right? So we actually pulled out the reference business architecture. The colleagues talked about the business capability, the process capability, how it maps to solution architecture, and then it became a very simple conversation about what should get turned on, what solutions do you need, and also what integrations do you need to drive. A lot of this is now also built into our framework with Signavio and LeanIX. The last time I was here, I talked about the Process Explorer, where you have a lot of the content around industry-wise process maps, which you can look at it and say, you know, which of these I need to run within my systems, which of these are commodity processes, which of these are differentiated, right? That allows you to have a better understanding of how you would deploy these applications. Obviously, we're also not saying, when we say clean code, that you cannot customize things. Because customization is an important secret sauce that you do in your business process. So when you hear me say that, you're like, okay, this probably doesn't connect. Are you saying that we can customize? I'm saying, yes, you can customize, but the customization needs to be done in a cloud-compliant format, which means you need to do it in a way that the upgrade doesn't break it the next time it comes along. How do you do it? You use the extension methodology, and you use BTP as a framework to do that, right? So there's very specific guidance on how do you do extensibility. Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, right? Tier 1 is using APIs, Tier 2 is a wrapper, Tier 3 is all that bad stuff that you need to bring it to Tier 2 or Tier 1. We talk about standard business processes, how do you bring it back to standard? We talk about integrations and so on. So all of that helps you figure out how do you create that robust application layer. Then we talk about the business data cloud. This slide is good to talk about this from a high level, right? So when you think about this, it gives the whole idea with business data cloud is we give you a unified data view. We give you it in a view that AI can consume it. We also give you views in which you can get insights from the data, right? So when you look at the stack and you look at that little box there, it builds it out into inside apps that we'll talk about. We talk about the business data fabric, and we talk about things like the data products. That sounds fairly complicated, doesn't it? Life used to be simple when we had BW, and then you had some, business objects products, and now we all have gone and bought a bunch of visualization tools, and it's a mess, right? So part of this whole business suite conversation is to figure out what is that data strategy? How does this align with what we are trying to do? And what we are trying to do is to get into a little bit more detail and give you a perspective of how you can consume the business data cloud. So on the bottom, you see those native applications. They're creating data, right? So they're data producers. Then you bring it into this data fabric, and then you see all these different things. You see the data products. It's not a product that you buy. It's a term that we're using in the context of the business data cloud. The data product is just packaged data that you can consume easily to the space above or to the AI agents. Those data products can be data that's directly from those native LOB solutions that you can directly consume, or it could be derived data where you map together different data from, let's say, Ariba or SuccessFactors together with S4 that can be consumed in that data fabric. When you look at that second tier, you see with BDC, BW, DataSphere, and Databricks, that's the place that you need to get more curious about, right? How many of you use DataSphere? Right? And you also use BW together with DataSphere? Some of you do, right? Not a lot of you. Those who are using BW, do you use DataSphere? DataSphere is the successor of BW. True or false? Kind of true, right? But you have to make it true. So this journey is to go from BW to transition into DataSphere, figure out how Databricks might be relevant for you to make it more smarter, and then make sure that the visualization happens on that analytics cloud and goes all the way to inside apps, right? So the transition from BW is going to be something that you have to be intentional and thoughtful about. How do you move from one to the other, right? But we give you a framework how to think about it as you go from BW to DataSphere, taking advantage of things from Databricks, and then the visualization piece, both with the inside apps and the analytics cloud. So you've seen two pieces now, right? So you've got the transaction layer, you've got the data layer. Now we'll talk a little bit more about the app. We've talked about apps and the UX experience all this while, maybe in the last several years with the Fiori front end, correct? We talked about the mobile experience, we talked about Fiori. And now you have things where we are saying AI is the new UI, right? So how is that even possible? It's possible because if I had a conversational assistant that I can speak to and get things done, can that be a new AI for me? If I can use it in places where I'm looking at a business process map, and I can speak to that process map and ask how customizes my process, compare it to best practices and standard, do a simulation for me about my process. If I change it to standard, how much time would it save me? Now we are getting into those, right? We're also getting into areas where we say if we create agents that can take business decisions, now AI is more powerful. Now this is a fundamental change, right? So we introduce things with AI as a UI. You have to think about what does that do to the workforce? Like who starts using AI? I think one of the most powerful things is that AI makes recommendations, and then I sit and wonder who would take those recommendations, make a business decision for a business process. Today we are not used to it, right? We've got communities of people who come together, have a meeting, and talk about the data. We print out graphs and sheets and what have you, and then we make a recommendation to the leader, and then we deliberate, and then maybe in 2 weeks we make decisions, right? So Those things are going to fundamentally change when we think about things like the AI agents. When you think about AI from an SAP standpoint, I asked this question to a group of folks who were in the room and said, when you think about AI, does SAP's mind always come to top as an AI provider? And half the room said no. I'm not going to ask the question because it might be embarrassing. But it's true, right? We are trying to embed AI we have embedded AI into our business process. We have given you options with foundational models and third-party products where you can train your data with different parties. You can have custom AI use cases, and then we talk about these AI agents, right? So think about AI in the usage pattern of how you would consume it. Would you consume it through Joule in a conversational format together with the agents? But some of it requires that you have that embedded AI activated, right? Anybody using any machine learning or AI scope? Few of you, right? If you're running an intelligent application like a cash application that does reconciliation, an AI agent might need some of those embedded AI functionality to be activated. So the point here I'm making is that if you don't look at embedded AI, you might not get the most value when you look at this slide and say, can I have Joule and Joule agents work across my business process, right? So it's not that exclusively you'll just say, I'm going to go straight to an agent and make sure that everything works. There might be scenarios where that it works, but it might be that some of the embedded AI use cases need to be activated too, right? So now you start thinking about how do I create a plan from an architecture standpoint, but also from a consumption standpoint of how to consume AI. We talked about these Joule agents. I've got a cool video that I'm going to play. Ted, who's I don't believe is here, he's one of our AI leaders. He's actually speaking, I believe either tomorrow or day after, about how we create these agents. And I think when you finish listening to the video, it's going to sort of give you this context of what are these agents, how do they work across a business process. But I'm hoping it also creates curiosity in your mind about what can these agents do for your own business, and how can you create it, right? So the agents are in the LOB areas. You can see it. Joule will orchestrate this process. It'll also run analytics that feed the agents. And you'll see a lot of this in the next few seconds when I play the video, where the agent works across multiple business areas to bring data back to you. And ultimately, in this particular scenario, it presents several options for the human to react and to make some decisions, right? That's where we are going to. We don't have those kind of scenarios today. What we usually have is workflows, and we have documentation, and we have email alerts and things like that. And then you bring a lot of that into meetings to make a decision, right? You don't have the system proposing alternatives for you that you need to make a decision on. So that's where we're going to change. I'm not going to take a question yet, but I'm going to play the video next. Okay, so the title for this is to go hire an agent, right? This sort of blows your mind when you listen to this video afterwards and says, in this particular scenario, there's an agent that's doing a lot of the work. So I think it's also interesting to think about after you watch the video, what does this do overall from a workforce planning standpoint, right? But let's listen to the video.
Let's start with how AI agents all come together in Joule. When we go to the Explore tab, you can see how end users can choose to enable more expert AI agents for targeted interactions. Joule is the orchestrator of these AI agents. Let's see it in action how the AI agents help business users eliminate tedious work to focus on what really matters. In this example, we're looking at a customer experience agent that communicates with the customer and a cash flow agent that orchestrates the whole flow. And these agents work seamlessly within the SAP system and in the background with Microsoft Copilot. As you can see, I just got a Teams notification with an urgent customer problem. A company was billed for renting drilling equipment, but unfortunately, it arrived a few days late. However, the agents have come up with a solution to resolve this and suggested 2 goodwill gestures that I could also offer the customer. But before I agree, what I want to do is find out what's going on in the background. So I'm going to select Review and see the original mail that they'd sent us. I can see the AI also tells me what the agents did. They laid out a plan, read the customer's email, retrieved information, created a dispute proposal, and many more steps. To see the invoice, we can jump into S4. I want to understand concrete next steps, so I ask Joule to tell us what's actually happening. The collection agent talks to a customer service agent, to the financial accounting agent, and then the shipping and receiving agent is also contacted. And then the final recommendation is displayed. A process that would usually take hours automated in just a few seconds. With Joule, we can also see the logic, the reasoning, and the sources. And I even get 2 alternative suggestions. That's fantastic. I think I know what to do. Let's accept the resolution and select Goodwill option B. And again, our agents work together to do all of this, creating an email using an LLM. This being said, the human always has the final say. Now let's look at the dispute case that's been created in the system. The disputed amount of €6,148 has now been settled and the dispute is closed. What a success! After making sure our customers stay happy, I need to take care of addressing the issue caused by my third-party shipment company who did not deliver on time. But what can I do about this? Well, I can ask the AI to find out what I should do. And our various agents make this a very simple activity to perform. They tell me that the issue that occurred clearly violated our service level agreement and recommends that I should open a dispute case. In only one click, I can get the dispute case opened and simply send that off to the shipper. And there you have it, put very simply, agents working together for a better resolution. A process that would usually take days or weeks to complete has been solved in just a few minutes. That's super powerful, and that's what we focus on with agents.
Pretty cool, right? How many of you are thinking this is probably not ready yet? Some of you, right? It's in the works. I think Ted's going to talk tomorrow a little bit more about when is it going to be available and what's the roadmap and how do you consume it. You can ask him questions also about what does it take to put this in? Is it only available for customers on Rise? I think I need to skip to the next slide. And so on and so forth. Right, so this allows you to understand a little bit about the possibilities with the business suite. It wasn't that these topics are all new, right? Especially around the transactional systems, the business data cloud. We talk about the AI pieces, but now when we talk about the business suite, we're talking about these 3 topics integrated together, right? So I've left you with the slide with obviously the rainbow picture, but then you should be able to look at the slide, and if somebody says, what is the SAP business suite? You should be able to tell them. It's a combination of the application data with those transactional systems, the business data cloud, and AI. Together makes the business suite. How you consume it is a journey that you have to be on, right? So I think Anya had a really nice slide that talked about the business suite, and several of you are probably also thinking, well, what about Rise? Rise is still relevant as your journey to Cloud ERP. Right? So how you get from ECC to S4 in Rise or in Grow with public cloud is still relevant when we talk about your Cloud ERP journey. What you do in those LOB situations is also still relevant. If you run something that's non-SAP, we have to talk about SAP and non-SAP data coming together in that business data cloud that can now be consumed by AI. It doesn't mean that if you run parts of that lighter blue in a different LOB in a different product, that you're not a consumer of business suite. Yes, you are, right? So from these sessions, I just want you to get the grounding on what is the business suite. I think ultimately we want to make sure that this audience on this slide gets the benefit of the business suite. So when you go back and you think about architecting an enterprise architecture around the business suite, it gives you an idea of what and how you architect it, what solutions do you use, what agents are available, and how does this help transform your business? In the next couple of days, I hope you stay curious. You learn a lot more about the business suite. You really know a lot about the transactional systems. I think the new stuff is around the business data cloud and AI, and hopefully that gives you a better grounding in terms of how you architect this for your own situations. Thank you all for the time today. And look forward to a great week.
Thank you. You know the drill, my friend. So a brief stretch, and then Stefan Piche will come up.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ranjeet.
All right, thanks.
Thanks.
Same here.